In a session that paralyzed the nation and sent shockwaves rippling through the entire American political establishment, the United States Supreme Court, in a razor-sharp 6-3 decision that cleaved the country in two, invalidated the military orders issued by Donald Trump during his presidential term, declaring them unconstitutional and a flagrant abuse of executive power. It was November 6, 2025, and what began as a legal challenge from civil rights organizations against mass deportation policies and the deployment of troops along the southern border morphed into a legal earthquake that questioned the very essence of separation of powers. The liberal justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, joined by the surprising conservative duo Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, formed the majority that wrote Trump's orders violated the Constitution's Guarantees Clause and the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which bars the use of the military in domestic affairs without congressional authorization. Trump, now back in the White House after a razor-thin 2024 election victory, reacted with fury in a live-streamed press conference from Mar-a-Lago, pounding the table and proclaiming the court a nest of activists masquerading as judges, orchestrating a coup against American sovereignty. His supporters gathered in impromptu vigils in cities like Phoenix and El Paso, waving MAGA flags and chanting about judicial theft, while moderate Democrats like former President Joe Biden, in a rare statement, praised the ruling as a triumph of democracy over authoritarianism. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned at the Pentagon, where generals loyal to Trump hesitated to comply with immediate troop demobilization orders, fearing political reprisals or even a schism within the armed ranks. The verdict was not merely symbolic. It ordered the release of thousands of migrants detained under the pretext of national security and prohibited future invocations of martial law without rigorous scrutiny, exposing Trump to a flood of civil lawsuits from separated families and indigenous activists whose lands were seized for detention camps. Legal analysts in frenzied panels on CNN and MSNBC dissected the impact with this decision, the precedent from Youngstown Sheet and Tube Co. v. Sawyer in 1952 was revived with full force, limiting the president to executive actions strictly defined by law and setting precedents for challenges to other Trumpist policies like unilateral sanctions against China and the use of drones in domestic anti-terrorism operations. Trump, in a barrage of Truth Social posts, amassing millions of views in hours, called for a constitutional revolution and hinted at emergency judge appointments to purge the rot. But the damage was done. Republican allies in Congress like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell issued lukewarm statements prioritizing economic stability over partisan loyalties. As the sun set over the Capitol, helicopters hovered over Washington on routine patrols that now seemed ironic, and the world watched in stunned silence as a superpower questioned its own foundations. The court's decision was no mere technicality. It was a roar against Caesarism, a reminder that even the most powerful man on the planet answers to the law. Retired generals like Mark Milley, now vocal on podcasts, commented that the military is no president's plaything, echoing fears of a return to forced isolationism. Migrants released on buses into the country's interior told horror stories in exclusive interviews, painting pictures of overcrowded camps where children cried for unseen parents. Trump, isolated in his bubble of faithful advisors, planned desperate appeals, but the clock ticked against him. The verdict demanded implementation within 30 days under penalty of federal sanctions. The nation held its breath, divided between fear of instability and relief at brakes on absolute power. In the following days, protests erupted in Dallas, where war veterans marched in solidarity, with the ruling arguing Trump's orders dishonored the oath to defend the Constitution. International media, from Al Jazeera to The Guardian, covered the event as a watershed in American democracy, comparing it to Watergate, but with military steroids. Trump, in a leaked call to a billionaire donor, cursed the justices by name, promising revenge at the 2026 polls, but the tone was defeat, not defiance. The Supreme Court, once a conservative bastion thanks to Trump's appointments, turned the tide against him, exposing cracks in his coalition. Meanwhile, in law school classrooms across the country, professors paused lectures to debate the case, using it as a living lesson on checks and balances. The shocking verdict did not end with military orders. It echoed like an alarm bell for the future, questioning whether America could withstand another term of constitutional experiments. As night fell, Lights flickered in Department of Justice offices, where prosecutors prepared inquiries into potential violations. Trump, gazing at the Florida Ocean, saw not waves of support, but tsunamis of accountability approaching. The empire of executive orders crumbled, and with it, the illusion of presidential impunity. Generals in remote barracks exchanged discreet toasts to the decision, seeing it as salvation for their integrity, while junior officers updated resumes fearing purges. The ruling not only dismantled policies, but rebuilt trust in institutions eroded by years of polarization. Trump, in private meetings with children, planned media counterattacks, but even they whispered realism. The verdict marked the end of an era of imperial commands and the dawn of collective accountability, where the president is servant, not sovereign. The Supreme Court's decision thundered through the heart of America's military-industrial complex, like a sonic boom, forcing an immediate recalibration that exposed the vulnerable underbelly of a system long accustomed to obeying without question. In the Pentagon war rooms, once illuminated by drone surveillance screens now plunged into emergency huddles, senior officers debated the legality of revoking orders Trump had signed with golden pen flourishes promising a steel wall on the border and relentless cartel hunts. Marine Corps Commandant General David Berger issued a leaked internal memo to the Washington Post instructing troops to suspend detention operations immediately and return to training posts, citing the verdict as the supreme law of the land. Trump, furious, dialed the Secretary of Defense, a loyal appointee from his second administration, demanding unwavering allegiance, but the line crackled with hesitation, echoing Milley's 2020 dilemma. Beyond the Pentagon's walls, the impact spread like oil on water in Texas bases. Soldiers dismantled razor wire from makeshift camps, freeing detainees who raised fists in gratitude mixed with distrust. ACLU activists who filed the original suit celebrated in packed press conferences, declaring, "The military is no border police," while migrant families sued the government for billions in moral damages. Trump counterattacked with a parallel executive decree invoking emergency powers under the Insurrection Act of 1807, but lower court judges inspired by the Supreme Court issued temporary blocks within hours, creating a legal labyrinth that paralyzed the federal machine. In Congress, hawkish Republicans like Ted Cruz tweeted outrage, calling the ruling treason to veterans, but Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seized the moment to push reforms proposing hearings on abusive military use in domestic politics. The shocking verdict did not stop at borders. It questioned global operations, invalidating Trump's orders for selective bombings in the Middle East, without UN approval, irking allies like Israel and Saudi Arabia, whose ambassadors issued diplomatic notes of concern. On Wall Street, defense company stocks like Lockheed Martin plummeted 12% in a day, investors fearing cuts in border surveillance contracts. Trump, at a nighttime rally in Miami, whipped the crowd with promises of patriotic judges to replace the traitors, but the audience, though loud, included whispers of doubt among donors eyeing approaching electoral risks. Military analysts at think tanks like the Brookings Institution dissected the precedent with this ruling future. Presidents would hesitate to militarize domestic crises, potentially weakening responses to real disasters like hurricanes or pandemics. Meanwhile, in Mexican border villages, communities celebrated the end of American nighttime raids, with local mayors erecting symbolic monuments to the Supreme Court. In the U.S., anti-war veterans organized marches in Washington, carrying signs reading, "Not in our name," echoing Vietnam protests. Trump, pressured by aides, considered a constitutional amendment to expand presidential powers, but support evaporated. Even Fox News moderated tones, interviewing former judges, defending the decision as essential balance. Chaos extended to the judiciary. Appellate courts nationwide faced Trump's emergency petitions, but backlogs grew, with clerks overwhelmed by 500-page briefs. In a dramatic twist, a Department of Homeland Security whistleblower revealed 2024 emails showing Trump ordering drastic measures against dissenting judges, fueling FBI inquiries into obstruction of justice. The polarized nation saw social media as a battlefield of court treason, trending among conservatives, while light justice wins echoed among progressives. The verdict was no chapter end. It was the start of a military accountability era, forcing Trump to navigate murky waters without the anchor of unquestionable orders. Retired generals published instant books the day the military said no, selling thousands in pre-orders. As winter approached, military bases lit symbolic bonfires to burn obsolete documents, a purging ritual Trump viewed as humiliation. His Silicon Valley allies, like Peter Thiel, donated to legal defense funds, but money barely covered waves of class actions. The court's shocking ruling in its scope redefined not just Trump's orders, but the American social contract power serves the people, not the reverse. In empty war rooms, echoes of revoked commands whispered bitter lessons for future commanders-in-chief. Trump, staring at outdated maps, felt the weight of a presidency chained by law, an orange man in a world of gray checks. Soldiers in distant barracks swapped stories of relief mixed with uncertainty about future missions, while military families sued for traumas inflicted by failed policies. The verdict catalyzed a silent purge in high command, with promotions for pragmatic officers and dismissals for ideologues. Trump, in rage, summoned allies for a Camp David summit, but absences marked the empty room. The shockwave did not diminish it, grew, transforming doubt into enduring legal doctrine. As weeks unfolded after the Supreme Court's verdict, the impact of Trump's invalidated military orders crystallized into a mosaic of reforms and retaliations that rewrote the American governance playbook. In the fall of 2025, with leaves falling like confetti from a closed era, Congress passed the Bipartisan Military Transparency Act, requiring annual reports on armed forces use on domestic soil, a direct victory for the original plaintiffs, whom Trump labeled infiltrated globalists. The former president, now confined to guerrilla media strategies, launched a PAC to fund pro-executive power candidates in the 2026 midterms, but Gallup polls showed his approval plunging to 38%, with independents citing the verdict as the break we needed. On the international front, allies like the British Prime Minister praised the ruling at NATO summits, seeing it as a model to contain rising populists in Europe, while adversaries like Vladimir Putin mocked in speeches calling Trump the Constitution's lapdog. Domestically, troop demobilization from the border freed billions in funds for infrastructure, with Biden, now senior advisor, inaugurating Texas bridges financed by budget redirection. Trump countered on Joe Rogan podcasts, claiming the court opened doors to foreign invasions, but viewership dropped, signaling public fatigue with apocalyptic narratives. In courts, derivative actions bloomed. Soldier families dead in border missions sued for negligence, revealing internal reports painting Trump's orders as unnecessary risks for political staging. The Pentagon, under interim new leadership, implemented constitutional ethics training with generals, citing the verdict in morning briefings as our moral compass. Empowered activists expanded suits to challenge surveillance drones at Black Lives Matter protests, arguing parallels with military abuses. Trump, in a rehab attempt, named a moderate border czar, but the Democrat Senate blocked confirmations, forcing compromises, diluting his agenda. Year-end media retrospectives ranked the verdict #1 moment of 2025, surpassing even elections, with Netflix documentaries in production on the day law defeated the king. Educators incorporated the case into curricula, teaching kids separation of powers through Trump trial simulations. Meanwhile, former Trump aides leaked memoirs describing meetings where he scribbled orders on napkins, ignoring legal warnings. The verdict's legacy extended to pop culture. Judge superhero memes viralized on TikTok, and rappers like Killer Mike dedicated tracks to the ruling. Trump enforced Bedminster retreat, dictated a book, Betrayed by the Robe, but publishers hesitated, fearing boycotts. Yale Law Journal academic surveys predicted a wave of precedents limiting executive powers, potentially affecting future climate or cyber crises. The scarred but strengthened nation debated at family dinners whether the verdict saved democracy or weakened it. Reformed generals formed a constitutional guardians council monitoring potential abuses. Trump, in rare public appearances, softened rhetoric, focusing on economy, but the ghost of revoked orders haunted his shadow. The shocking verdict, born from a humble challenge, proved unshakable, a pillar raised against arbitrariness, ensuring military orders served the nation, not one man. As 2026 dawned, America marched forward with the court as beacon in turbulent seas, and Trump as lesson in presidential hubris. The cycle of power, tamed by law, spun slower, but with renewed justice. Veterans at annual conventions toasted the ruling as true patriotism, while young recruits swore allegiance to the Constitution, not individuals. Budget reforms redirected funds to public education and health, turning detention camps into community centers. Trump in private letters admitted frustration, but persisted in grandeur visions. The legacy endured not as wound, but honorable scar shaping a more resilient republic. Border towns once militarized bloomed with cross-cultural festivals, migrants and locals sharing stories under banners reading, "Unity over Force." Legal scholars penned treatises hailing the decision as the new Youngstown forging chains on executive overreach for generations. Trump's PAC faltered, donations drying as donors bet on post-Trump GOP rising from ashes. In quiet Pentagon corridors, plaques commemorated the verdict date, a reminder that duty trumps decree. International law forums cited the case in debates on civilian-military balance, inspiring similar curbs in Brazil and India. Trump, watching sunsets from Mar-a-Lago, pondered alternate histories, but reality anchored him, the court's words etched in stone. Veterans groups lobbied for medals to whistleblowers who exposed order flaws, turning betrayal tales into heroism. Schools named debate clubs after the majority justices, inspiring civic engagement spikes among Gen Z. The verdict's ripple created a safer democracy where presidents propose and Congress disposes, restoring balance eroded by decades of emergency creep. Trump in final interviews claimed vindication would come, but history's draft already wrote him as cautionary tale. The unshakable ruling stood tall, a fortress against tyranny's whisper, ensuring America's experiment endured tested and true.